Divide and Conquer here is the other episode of Teen Titans, which is a major contender for the first episode of the series slot. A lot of people think that this one is the first episode of the series, and it certainly could serve as the first episode of the series. It could serve as a strong introduction to the Titans, especially the first battle of the episode. The fight against the supervillain Cinderblock, which shows off their powers and abilities probably better than we've ever seen them shown off before. My main problem with calling this the first episode comes from the fact that once that fight is over, this episode stops being about introducing the characters and starts being a story about Robin and Cyborg. Cinderblock breaks into a prison, and the Teen Titans respond to try to stop him from doing whatever he's trying to do there. And when Robin and Cyborg try to use a combination attack that they devised to bring Cinderblock down, one or the other of them missteps, they end up crashing into each other, causing a lot of collateral damage to their own team, and Cinderblock gets away. He is able to free a supervillain named Plasmus, who is incarcerated here of his own volition, as he has sort of a Bruce Banner Hulk thing going on, where his human form knows that he can transform into a monster and tries to prevent it. And he takes this guy, Plasmus, away to Slade, the villain that we were introduced to in the first episode. Slade needs Plasmus to create a distraction for the Titans while Cinderblock gets something else done for him. As powerful as the Titans are, there's only a few beings that can really distract them for all that long. Plasmus is a lot like the Batman villain Clayface, in that he can shapeshift, he can regenerate, he's incredibly dangerous, and it's ridiculously hard to do damage to him. He can also make himself stronger by absorbing toxic materials, and is somewhat toxic himself. His body itself has toxic properties. Robin and Cyborg are at odds now because of their misstep. They are both incredibly strong-willed and hard-headed individuals. They're actually very similar people when you get right down to it. And so rather than just apologize to each other and move on, they butt heads, each insisting that the other must be responsible. Though I will admit Robin is a little harder on Cyborg than Cyborg is on Robin, at least initially. But to be fair to Robin, Robin's basically a ninja, so Cyborg is the one who is more likely to have misstepped during their combination. But that doesn't matter, they're still teammates and friends. They should have been able to work through this amicably, but they didn't. And Cyborg ends up quitting the team. And so while Slade is planning for whatever he's planning for, we get a sequence of scenes back at the Titans Tower of everybody missing Cyborg, but Robin cooling down after his fight with Cyborg and realizing that regardless of the specific situation, he was in the wrong to treat his friend that way. This is about when they get the call that Plasmus is attacking, though, so there's no time to try to find Cyborg and bring him back before they go and fight. They end up cornering Plasmus in what looks like a toxic waste processing plant, as in a plant which barrels toxic waste, which don't know why that would be just in the middle of the city, but whatever. And they do make some progress against him, but they just aren't able to do enough damage to knock him out, which is how you beat him. You have to knock him unconscious to turn him back into his human form. They end up getting split up when Plasmus literally splits himself up into multiple monster forms. And they're in a hurry now too, because they've also gotten the call that Cinderblock is attacking elsewhere. But it just doesn't matter, they still aren't able to do enough damage to overwhelm this guy. Robin comes up with a strategy to destroy him by dumping him into some toxic waste, basically diluting him to the point that he can't reform, and does manage to defeat one of his segments that way. But he would have died at the same time if it hadn't been for Cyborg returning in the nick of time and catching him before he could fall into the vat himself. It's implied that Cyborg off-screen at some point came to the same realization that Robin did, that he was also in the wrong and needs to apologize for his part in the argument. The implication here being that we don't need to see Cyborg's side of things because he and Robin are so similar in terms of their personalities. The two of them are able to team up and use the same combo attack that they failed to utilize earlier to finally knock Plasmus out and save the others. And it's even revealed that Cyborg managed to defeat Cinderblock off-screen before he came to rescue the other Titans somehow. And they even realize that this is too smart a plan for Cinderblock, so somebody else must be pulling the strings, and basically Slade's plan fails miserably. Whatever it was, it fails miserably. Which brings me to the main reason why I like this better as a third episode than as a first episode. It's revealed to the audience by Slade himself that he didn't expect the Hive mercenaries to defeat the Titans, at least not permanently. That he only wanted them to relay his name to the Titans. He derives enjoyment from toying with the Titans, and them knowing who he is increases that for him. And hence, that episode also serves as an introduction to Slade for us in the audience. This episode doesn't. This episode shows Slade in a business-as-usual kind of way, as the Saturday morning cartoon villain type of character that he is early on in this show. Yes, it does a pretty good job introducing the Titans to us, but it doesn't do a good job introducing him, and it does eventually turn into one of those character-building episodes that I was talking about last week. For Robin, Cyborg, and, if you really think about it, Slade, too. This is the episode where we first see that he is amused by watching them resist him. And at the end, we see that when he fails when he didn't expect to, he is genuinely upset by it, despite the fact that he seems so calm for the rest of the episode. This stuff with Slade doesn't necessarily have to take place after the stuff with Slade in Final Exam, but it works so much better if it does. Hence why I like to place this episode here in the viewing order. All of that said, though, I think this is probably the weakest episode of the show that we've watched so far, because they spent so much time on the fight at the beginning. Even though it was really cool to see all the Titans' powers and everything, we didn't get a lot of time to deal with the character stuff here. I mean, yeah, sure, Robin and Cyborg are both being portrayed as the kind of person who can't stand to be wrong and so butts heads with people. And yeah, it's pretty realistic to show that kind of person stepping away from the situation, calming down, and realizing that they were in the wrong. But they're trying to create this parallel between Robin and Cyborg. And yeah, the episode does a fair enough job implying that parallel, but I would have liked to have seen it some too. I would have liked to have seen some of Cyborg coming to that same realization. And I definitely would have liked to have seen how Cyborg defeated Cinderblock. It just doesn't seem realistic to me that he could have defeated Cinderblock, someone who gave all 5 of them trouble, and still had time to realize that the other Titans were in danger and make it to that factory to save them, all in the amount of time that he had to do that. It just really felt like this episode was trying to bite off more than it could chew. Maybe it should have been a 2-part episode set later in the season. But at the end of the day, I just don't think it's that great. It's still a fun episode of the show. There's still some good comedy moments, and I still like these characters a lot. But I just feel like this episode could have been handled a lot better, and it's a shame that it wasn't. I also wish we had gotten some inkling at this point as to what Slade's plans actually were. I get that they were trying to make him feel like the typical Saturday morning cartoon villain at this point, so that later, when he became a genuine threat, it would be that much more interesting. But still, he just comes across as too ineffectual here. All of that said, though, guys, of course, as per usual, I'd like to know, what do you think of this episode of Teen Titans if you have seen it? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below or over on my Discord, link in the description. Either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.